Let's Take This Outside with Marianne Iveson, the podcast where she speaks to athletes, outdoor professionals, and scientists about why they connect with nature.
Paul Zizka is an award-winning mountain landscape and adventure photographer based in Banff, Canada. Paul's images have been featured on countless book covers and in a variety of highly regarded publications, including National Geographic, Outside Magazine, Wall Street Journal, Maclean's, just to name a few. His client list includes leading national and global brands such as Canon, Apple, NHL, Dell, Arc'teryx, Panasonic, and MEC. Paul lives in Banff, Alberta with his wife, writer Megan J. Ward, and their two daughters. Please welcome Paul Zizka. Paul, welcome to Let's Take This Outside. I cannot think of a cooler photographer to talk to. And I haven't talked to many photographers, so I think this is going to be good.
Thanks so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Lee McAdam recommended I speak with you, and Lee is a huge travel blogger based out of Calgary, and she's like, you have to talk to Paul. And I reached out. Your incredible wife, Megan, I ended up booking her for a podcast as well. So you are highly recommended by some amazing women, so you must be doing something right.
I'll definitely take that as a compliment. Yeah, Lee's been so supportive over the years, and there's always been a lot of mutual respect with regards to what we each do and try to contribute to our communities. So I'm a big fan of hers as well.
Yeah, she's easy to like, isn't she?
Oh, yeah.
Paul, you have captured some of the most beautiful photos in nature, but I want to start, where did your love of nature begin? Childhood?
No, not really. I grew up in the suburbs of Quebec City, and as an 80s sort of kids, I would spend a lot of time outside for sure. And would just come home when I was hungry type of scenario. But it was still the suburbs. So I didn't really spend a lot of time in what I would call like the wilderness, backyard wilderness, I guess. I didn't really get into the wilderness until I moved to the mountains much later in life. And it's my parents, I did a lot of things with my parents, but going camping or hiking or something is not really things that we would do as a family.
And, I'm in Ottawa, so really close to Gatineau Park. It's too bad because I'm sure now you look back and you look at all the beauty that Quebec has, right? How much time do you spend in Quebec now and be like, oh my gosh, I wish as a kid I had more time here?
We go to Quebec, I want to say, every 2 or 3 years. My family, my parents, my brother are up there. And so we try to visit, every 2 or 3 years. And I think it's a pretty typical situation where, you don't realize what you had around you until you're away from it for an extended period of time. And then you start to treasure it quite a bit more. So every time we go to Quebec, the proximity to nature strikes me, the beauty of the old town, etc. Things that I just didn't really pay too much attention to when I lived there full time.
Right. And the west coast of Canada, personally, I've spent more time in the Rockies than I have in the east coast of Canada. Please tell me that you have an appreciation now as an adult for, the West Coast and East Coast are very, very different.
Oh, absolutely. I have an appreciation for the astonishing variety of landscapes that we have in Canada. I absolutely love the North as well. I love the prairies. I think there are different types of beauty. Of course, just the big skies of central Canada versus, the ruggedness of the coasts and the skylines we have here in the Rockies, and just sort of, I think there's a lot of beauty in the desolation of the North as well. And so I think we're so fortunate to have all of those different astonishing variety of, beautiful places all within one country is phenomenal.
At what point were you like, I want to move to the Rockies? Was it for photography? Was it for, I'm just a kid and I just want to get out and explore and live somewhere else? Like, what brought you to the Rocky Mountains, and then what made you stay?
I came out to the Rockies as soon as my parents let me go on a trip out west. And it's something that I think a lot of Quebec and Ontario kids just do or did back then, was as, in our teens, we would just go out west and just see the world and see the rest of the countries. And I know that the rest of the country, and I know I'd heard stories from older members of the family about their adventures on the West Coast or in the Rockies. And that's sort of prompted me to go and check it out for myself the second that it felt reasonable to do so. And so I think I was probably 16 when I just took off with a couple friends and ended up in the Rockies for the first time. And and at that point, it was just really a curiosity thing. There was no intention to I don't think I put a lot of thought into where I would end up beyond school and all that. I chose to move to the mountains after spending several consecutive summers in the mountains. And that's when I absolutely fell in love with the place. And I felt like it just made so much sense to just move here full time.
Do you remember the first time that you saw the Rocky Mountains? Do you remember that feeling at all?
Yeah, it's kind of a funny story. I was working in the Okanagan. I got a ride on a fruit truck to the Rockies, and I hadn't seen the Rockies yet because we'd flown over the Rockies to go work in the Okanagan, like a lot of Easterners do. And I spent the summer picking fruit and picking cherries, and then we thought, well, let's go see the Rockies before we fly home. I think our flight was out of Calgary and our flight in had been into Kelowna. And so I had no money. Hitchhiking was the only option for us. And so, we got a ride at the back of a fruit truck surrounded by all kinds of fruit. And we couldn't see outside for like a whole day. It was pitch black, right? And I'm not sure about the legalities of it, but anyways, that's a long time ago.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, so all we see is fruit for like hours and hours, and then we had our headlamps, but otherwise, then the truck stops and the back door just opens, and it was just full on blinding light at the beginning, because just getting accustomed to the amount of light pouring in. And then when the eyes adjusted, it was the most sudden introduction to the Rockies that you could imagine, because suddenly we're looking at the Lake Louise group of mountains.
That was your introduction, really? That's incredible.
Yeah. And so it was as sudden as it could have been, and I recall that moment very vividly. And we only had a few days to explore before it was time to go back home in time for school to start. And we hitchhiked around and did some of the we're sort of the tourist circuit, I guess. And and we were just absolutely blown away by the scale and the beauty. And then I think that's, of course, planted the seed to come back. And then not too long after that, I started returning the day that I would finish school in Quebec, the day after I would just fly out west and spend the summer here. And then I would get back to Quebec in time for school.
Did you end up going to school for photography, or how did that happen? Like, do you remember your first camera?
I went to school for geology. So I never studied photography in a formal setting. I lived at Bow Lake for a long time, same as my wife, Megan.
That's how you met
Megan, where I
yeah.
met her. And that's where a lot started for me, beyond my relationship with Meg. That's where I started really getting into falling in love with the wilderness and all of the possibilities for adventure, from camping to climbing to hiking. And then we were surrounded by so much beauty every day that I think we both felt compelled to just document it in one way or another. And Meg picked up a pen and I picked up the camera. And I had never been really interested in photography before that. My parents have zero interest in photography. We have very few family pictures, to be honest. So it's not something that I grew up with or anything like that. I think it came out of a desire to really just document the adventures we were having, but also the incredible beauty that we were surrounded with. And it was one of a few tools available. I'm not even quite sure why I picked up the camera as opposed to like a paintbrush or anything like that. I think it was a matter of convenience. I had owned like a 2 megapixel point and shoot Olympus camera for a couple years before that. And the odd person would say, you should take it more seriously. Feel like you have a good eye for it, etc. So maybe that stuck with me. But yeah, I picked up a camera. I remember a box arrived at Bow Lake with a Canon 5D, and I had no idea how to operate it. And I remember still at that time, because I was a beginner, well, I was as beginner as could be, I thought that the camera would mean investing in the camera would just automatically mean taking good pictures. And I remember running to the lake shore and taking photos of the reflection of the peaks around Bow Lake and being pretty disappointed with how the images looked because because I expected the camera to do all the work for me. And of course, the camera is only a tool that gets you there. So I recall those first experiments along the shore at Bow Lake all those years ago.
Do you remember the shot where you're like, oh, I think I have something here. I think I may be good at this?
Yeah, I think so. I remember a couple instances where I got something that right away in the moment gave me that, the shivers, that just gave me that thrilling sensation that I started buzzing. I felt like I had something that was my own, that was unique, that was aesthetically pleasing, that kind of had it all. And of course, they're images that I look at, all those years later, and they're pretty ordinary images. But at that time, they were exciting, and I think they were exciting because they made me realize that photography could be so much more than just like an arrangement of pixels and pretty pictures. Like it could be a way to it could be a creative outlet. It could impact people in a way that I could never have imagined. It could get people to care about this and that. I could stir up emotion in people or in myself looking at the photos later on. I could just, the power that photography has to just take you back to those moments. And just, I think those initial images, even though they weren't very good, I think they played a big role in helping me realize that photography could be so much more than just dryly documenting places and just showing mom and dad, hey, here's what we're up to. It could be so much more than that. And since then, I mean, it's like been an all-encompassing adventure. And now it even impacts like the lives of anyone who's close to me in a major way, especially my family.
Yeah, I think a lot of people could look at your life, Paul, and say, this guy is living a dream. This guy is living my dream. But, as a freelancer and a business owner myself, I know it's not just, this cut and dry thing and you put the images up and life is good and you sell and you make all this money. Like, I know you are very grateful for what you have. But what is the reality of being a full-time photographer with a family, always traveling?
It's quite the balancing act for sure. And we've been performing that act for 11 years now with the kids. And some days I think we do really well. And some days a few balls get dropped and we feel we wish we could just start the day over and try it again, sort of thing. But I think overall we're doing better and better in managing things. And the girls are getting a little bit older too. But it's of course, I think in this day and age of social media, it's a very curated version of our lives that we put online, and its reality is very, very different. There's a lot of moments that happen behind the scenes. They're not glamorous at all, that they're just the struggle. And there's a lot of parts of photography that I enjoy, but there's some parts of it that I could do without for sure. And those are not the parts that I celebrate online, that I put out there for people to see. And so I think now that we've had social media part of our lives for so long, I think the vast majority of people understand now that it's like such a small glimpse of your existence that you put out there, and that there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that goes into those images. And it's quite the balancing act, but I think it's so rewarding at the same time.
Speaking in the terms of, blood, sweat, and tears, you have photographed in some of the most remote places in the world. Do you have any memorable moments where things got a little dicey that people didn't see, or that maybe you're worried for your life? Megan hinted at this portrait you got of Mount Robson. And is there any moments that you can recall that got pretty dicey and you were pretty scared?
In hindsight, there's definitely a lot of moments that kind of reveal themselves as, I would say, close calls, probably. And I think I work in environments that are pretty fickle, where things can go south pretty quickly. Things can get desperate fairly quickly when something goes sideways. You can go from having just an amazing day out to having a very stressful day out in a matter of minutes. Canadian Rockies, the vertical world, not all vertical worlds are falling apart the way that the Rockies do. It's a very Rockies are a place that of just immeasurable beauty, but also it's a place that's just crumbling before our eyes, and that's where I do the bulk of my work. So sometimes it's a place where you don't really know how close you are to catastrophe. It's just, so I think there's probably been some luck involved over the years, but also I think especially when I started getting into hiking, scrambling, mountaineering, there's some images that I look at that probably weren't worth the amount of risk that I took. But that was unbeknownst to me at that time, right? So I think we all have, regardless of the discipline we're in, we look at our early days, especially in mountain environments, and we're like, wow, I can't believe we just put ourselves in that position. I'd like to think we're a bit more reasonable now for sure. And I think with the kids being around, I'm a lot more, my sphere of accessible risk has gotten a little bit smaller for sure. But there's been moments over the years where I think just places like they're extremely remote, like you said, like Greenland or Antarctica, where if something goes, it doesn't take like a huge mishap for things to get desperate pretty quickly. But overall, frankly, I've been very, very fortunate in over the course of my career. Like I can't really point to a moment where I felt like, this is it. That's a testament to how fortunate I've been over the course of all those adventures.
And I think it really speaks to how much you probably, the kids definitely play into it and having a family, but I think it plays into probably how much you respect nature and are connected to it and listen to it. And yes, probably a lot of luck too, but you've spent enough time outside, especially in the Rockies, like you said, it can get pretty dicey. Do you ever just go out and you say, today's not the day? It feels off, you get a weird feeling and saying, nope, I don't feel like today is going to be a good day. Or maybe you're worried about avalanche, or, there's a million things that could kill you in the mountains. So I'm sure you probably get that gut feeling sometimes too, right?
Yeah, for sure. I approach the mountains, I think, in a very rational way. I'm not really much of a gut feeling person. I'll just assess things maybe like almost scientifically, I guess, just looking just looking at the evidence before.
That's fair.
Yeah, just looking at the evidence before me. But I'm not the kind of person who's like, like I've had like a few 3 or 4 signs from the universe over the last 4 hours that this day is not going to go well, so we should turn around. I look at things like, well, they're probably all unrelated. And if the evidence before me at that point means we should proceed, then let's proceed. But I know a lot of people go by gut feeling, and I respect that too. I think there's a lot of approaches to the environment. But yeah, the mountains, I think, through your own experiences and through all the stories and that's one of the nice things about, social media and being, having access to essentially other people's mishaps, I think is you have constant reminders of how dangerous this place can be, as amazing as it is. And so I think, that really instills respect in people. And so I've never had, I feel like I think the mountains have a way to remind you that, whenever you feel like you've got the mountains figured out and your confidence is through the roof, they'll just kind of put you in a bit of a shameful way. They'll just put you back in your place. I find that often happens, early season, you're all gung ho, you're excited, you feel like you've got your act together, and the mountains will have a way to humble you a little bit and remind you that, all right, like it's not, I need to just, be very mindful of the dangers that are part of this environment.
Right. They have a great way of humbling you.
For sure.
Let's Take This Outside now has a newsletter. Keep up to date with outdoor news, events, and great discount codes and deals from our partners. Sign up today at letstakethisoutside.ca.
What is your attraction to cold and remote places? Some of my favorite pictures that I looked through were the ones in I don't know if you were like ice caves or people were ice climbing, just absolutely gorgeous. What is your attraction to cold and remote places? I know you have a project too called Cryophilia Project, right?
Yeah. So that project is all about documenting the changes that are happening in those cold environments, as well as the beauty of those places. I find they're just absolutely beautiful. I love ice. Ice has always been one of my favorite subjects to document. There's an amazing beauty in the way that like a simple thing like ice can just present itself in such a wide variety of ways. And I find that I keep rediscovering ice, and it's around here. Ice is something that is just so dynamic. Glaciers are changing very, very quickly, and so as sad as it all is, it just, the fact remains that they're very exciting environments to document for photographers, because creatively you're given a fresh canvas every time that you go. Every time you go, you find something that you've never noticed before. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm drawn to those environments. They're always different. They're excitingly dynamic. They are absolutely beautiful. And also they're places that not a lot of people are familiar with, not intimately anyways. And so for me, there's a joy that comes from just bringing those places to people, taking them along with me, whether it's on top of the ice or on the side or underneath, like the ice caves. There's amazing worlds out there that are sort of are under-documented, I think. I love solitude. I love the wilderness. I love remoteness. I've always been attracted to remote places. And the truth is, I think a lot of people try to avoid the cold, and just they're drawn to more inviting, I guess, kind of environments come summer. And going to those places often gets you away from, it's easy to find solitude. It's easy as a photographer to work in peace and quiet to just, and to not have impact on other people's experiences as well. And so I think that's another reason why I'm drawn to those places. And they're fascinating. They're that whole world of blue and white, and I think just the desolation is a big part of it for me. I've always been drawn to those harsh environments that are a little bit maybe misunderstood, and it's nice just for myself, for my own curiosity, to just go and explore them and try to understand them. But also it's nice if you can play a small role into getting people to find interest in them and understand them.
I do want to talk about your family and what that's like, but have you ever worked with Will Gadd before?
No, I haven't worked with Will. No, we've been in touch, been in the same place, same time, bunch of times over the years, and we've exchanged a lot of messages online. But I've never worked with him, no. But I'd love to at some point for sure.
I was lucky enough to interview him, and I got him on camera. He was actually hiking. His wife was ahead of him, and we did the interview while he was hiking to go climbing. Anyway, I just assumed at this point you would have worked with him by now, but maybe on the list.
Yeah, on the list for sure. Yeah, there's a lot of just really talented, inspiring people that I'd absolutely love to just put our heads together and see what we can come up with at some point.
What's it like to work with your wife, Megan, who is also a creative, and to be able to develop your skills separately, but also together over the years?
It's been incredible. I mean, there's absolutely no way that I could be doing what I do without Meg being in the mix. I was talking before about the sort of less glamorous things that need to happen for the business and to work out. And Meg just handles a lot of that behind the scenes, and she gets like no credit for it. That's one of the downsides of social media, is everybody thinks it's just me all the time, whereas for the better part of the last decade, we've had a team, not just me and Meg, but there's other people involved as well in making this all work. And people think it's just me doing all that needs doing all the time. And so that's that. Yeah. But I think that's just the way that the game works. But Meg's been just instrumental behind the scenes. And I think just seeing her, especially more recently as the girls get a little bit older, it's been amazing to see her just thrive with her own projects that I have nothing to do with, and just to be able to chase the passions of her own. She was understandably a little bit more bogged down than I was when the girls were babies. And now as the girls are a little bit more self-sufficient, then it's been amazing for her to just return to her passion, rediscover herself. But throughout all that, she's been just a huge part of Paul Zizka photography. And she is so good at a lot of the back end stuff, a lot of the crucial things that need to happen for a photo business to come together, because capturing compelling imagery is really just a small ingredient in the whole thing.
I really encourage everyone to listen to the episode with Megan and I. But now that your kids are a bit older, she was describing, when your first was born, it was totally not what you thought it was going to be the first year. But now that they're older, what does it mean to be doing bigger adventures as a family?
Oh, it's amazing. It's been incredible. I mean, I think we both treasured those times where you'll take 2 hours to cover a kilometer and look at every rock and snail and bug along the way. And it was great while it lasted. But I think Meg and I are both really excited to start seeing our girls just appreciate the same things that we do when we go hiking or camping, without having to force that upon them. Look at this. Hey, we should do this. We should look at that. Let's go to the top just because the view will open up. That just makes no sense to a 3-year-old. But now the girls are excited to they're excited to get out a tree line and just see how far we can see. And just, we all get excited about the same things. And so it means that there's a little bit less compromising that needs to happen on the trip. And that just makes things, I think, a lot smoother for everyone. And so, it's been incredible to just rediscover the places that we love just through our girls' eyes. And I think that's a lot of the joy lies in that for me.
I bet you were able to almost get a whole new creative angle when the girls were young and slow down, like really slow down, right?
It's absolutely true that the kids will just help you notice beauty at a smaller scale. Before I had the girls, I would just any forested section, I would just power walk through that so I could get the tree line and get the big shots. And the camera would stay in the bag the whole time. And I would just, that was kind of my approach to to climbing or to photography in general. And then, when you're forced to when you have no hope of getting out of the trees because you have like the 2-year-old with you, well, then I think you just sort of make peace with that and you just connect with them on their level. And then through that, you discover a lot of beauty that you've just been power walking past it for a decade. And so there's no question that it's made me a more better rounded photographer because I'm a lot better at noticing the small scenes. I've always been drawn first and foremost to the big epic imagery, like you probably saw, but I take more and more joy. I find more and more joy in just trying to create something well below tree line now. And I think that's at least partly because of just spending so much time on my knees with the girls looking at things.
You've been doing this long enough that social media wasn't always the way it is now. And you mentioned social media a couple times in this conversation. Do you think that social media is helpful now that everyone thinks they're a content creator? Everyone has in their iPhone, right? Everyone can take video and it could be like the crappiest video and someone gets like millions of views and you just like shot the most beautiful like backcountry thing and you're like, what? Right? Like obviously you have a lot of followers, but I guess my question is, what do you think of social media? Do you think it's helpful? And what do you think of like the landscape of everyone just creating their own content now?
Oh gosh, I wish we could do a 24-hour episode about this topic because it's something that I've just given a lot of thought.
We're doing a marathon.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot and I've had multiple great conversations with fellow photographers about this topic over the last few years. But I feel like social media, it can be helpful. I can't say it can't be helped because it's really propelled my career forward. I just kind of embraced it the moment that it came along and it allowed me to put my work in front of just so many people. And I'm very, very thankful for that. But I would say the game kind of changed later on when the algorithms were put in place. And then I feel like starting around that time, I think it did a disservice to a lot of photographers. And I think it can still be really, really helpful. But I think it's a matter of just really, it takes a lot of work to have a healthy relationship with it. I certainly don't think that you can't just attach the value of your work or your value as a person to online metrics. And I think that's the pitfall, I think, for a lot of us. And I'm still guilty of that at times, for sure, where, you'll have, like you said, you've shot something you're really, really proud of, and you'll just put it out there and you'll just get crickets, right? Nobody responds to it. And I think then it's hard. It's easy to start feeling discouraged as a creator. And at the same time, it's easy to feel encouraged to just look at what does get traction and just emulate what, just follow the recipe that will lead to online interaction. And the risk in that is just 5-10 years down the road, you end up with a body of work that is not your own, or that just looks like 10,000 people's body of work. And then I find that the collective risk in that is that it kind of homogenizes photography. And what you see is like not a whole bunch of, you don't see people's just individuality. You don't see their own vision. You see their attempt at gaining traction. And I think it's unfortunate, because I do a lot of mentoring, and it's unfortunate that I find a lot of new photographers, their main goal is how can I just gather the largest audience that I can in as little time as possible. And for that, subconsciously or not, they're willing to just sacrifice their own vision. They're willing to sacrifice a lot. And in a way, it's kind of hopeless, because you can't even run that race anymore if you're just starting as a photographer, because the algorithms are already in place. So you'll never get that amount of traction. So I usually encourage people to just really, in an effort to have a healthy relationship with social media, I usually encourage, especially newer photographer, to just not even play that game. Don't avoid the circus altogether. Avoid being a slave to social media. Just go out and create the images that you yourself are really excited about. And I think that eventually, if you stick with it and you kind of disregard the metrics a little bit, the right people will notice, and eventually you'll gain an audience. You'll get an audience that is not massive, but is truly interested in what you have to contribute to the world. And then I think good things just come out of that. So it's a huge topic for me, but I feel like there's a lot of good in it still, but it takes work to just retain a healthy relationship.
Thank you so much for your insight on that. And as someone who, I create podcasts, I do voiceover work, I can relate to that in a different creative sense, right? But something about it, this is very kind of inside business, is when you're posting on social media, when you're doing that, then it's really not your own anymore. And you can't control the algorithms, you can't control any of it. So having your own website, having your own domain is super important, right? Because you can actually sell your work. When it's on social media, they can change the rules at any time, right? They can change the rules at any time. If you're a content creator making $1 million a year and you're this big star, they can change one rule and all of your business is gone.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And that's one reason we haven't invested nearly as much time in social media over the last couple of years. And we've gone the route of newsletter quite a bit more, for example, where that's information that we do own. And so that's been where we focused our efforts more and more.
I know that, of course, your prints are available on your website. I think you have you get free desktop or phone backgrounds too if you sign up for the newsletter. Is that right?
Yeah, we refresh those once in a while.
And you also do mentoring too for other photographers. That's also on your website, right?
Yeah, that's right. Lots of teaching these days.
Is there anything else that you wanted to chat about or promote that's really exciting right now?
No, I mean, I'd love for people to check out the Cryophilia project if they're interested. I'm going to be busy over the next few months, just spending a lot of time around our local glaciers and documenting the changes that have happened and a lot of the beauty. And hopefully I can just make people feel awe and cold and remoteness. And hopefully I can do all that through the power of photography.
I have one very selfish question. What's your favorite mountain in the Rockies to photograph?
I'm going to say Mount Robson.
Oh, Robson. Okay. I thought you were going to say Rundle. Okay.
No, I also love Mount Rundle. I look at it every day, but Mount Robson for me is just the scale, the history, the aesthetics. It looks good from every possible angle. And I have a long love story with Mount Robson. And so whenever I get to set eyes on it, it's very special.
Paul Zizka, thank you so much for spending time with me today, and I'll post it all in the show notes. But I said to Megan, too, if you guys are ever in Ontario or Ottawa, I had no idea she was from Ottawa, and she has like family here, which is hilarious. I'm like, would love to meet you guys at one point, but thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Oh, it was such a pleasure. Thanks so much. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for listening. For more Let's Take This Outside, go to letstakethisoutside.ca.
Produced and distributed by the Sound Off Media Company.